What is up, YouTube? Dottz Gaming here, and welcome to my choosing a weapon guide for the Elder Scrolls Online. Looking back through my past guides, I've touched on this topic a bit, but based on many of the questions and comments that I've been receiving recently on my videos, it's clear that I have not gone in depth enough with this topic, and there is a great need for a weapons to have their own guide. I've been getting so many comments recently asking about why certain classes are able to use or should use certain weapons, so clearly people want to know about this topic. So what I'm going to do with this video is I'm going to talk about each weapon type, what resource their abilities use, the main use for the weapon, and what roles can take advantage of each of these weapon types. Before I even get into this guide though, I do want to mention a key detail that I think people need to consider when choosing their weapons. Abilities deal more damage and do more healing based on your power and your resource pool. So magicka costing abilities will deal more damage with more spell damage and magicka, and they'll also do more healing. And stamina abilities will deal more damage and do more healing based on your weapon damage and your stamina pool. Now this does not mean that a magicka character cannot take advantage of a stamina ability or vice versa. If you're going to be using an ability of the opposite resource, you're generally going to want to use one for utility, not one that you're going to be relying on for damage or healing, since it's not going to scale with your resource. For example, Stamina Nightblades will use Shadow Cloak for stealth, even though it costs magicka, because they want the utility and the ability to be in stealth. And since it deals no damage, it does not matter that it costs magicka. Many magicka characters who choose, I'm just going to use an example, Sword and Shield, can find Reverberating Bash useful even though it costs stamina and deals a little bit of damage. The main reason people use it is because it offers Major Defile and it offers a stun, which, like I said, is what draws people to that ability, the utility of it. So you need to weigh the utility options of abilities that use the opposite resource before you are incorporating them into your build. But that's just a little tidbit. Moving into the weapons themselves, we're going to start with two-handers. Now, two-handed weapons, as you can see, their abilities cost stamina. And the main use for a two-hander, the main most common use, is for stamina PvP. The reason is because momentum is a very key ability for stamina when they're playing in PvP. This could be morphed into rally or forward momentum. Rally gives a big heal and forward momentum gives a lot of snare removal, so it is a very, very good ability for PvP. And just, you know, the fact that 2H also has a gap closer, there's a lot of reasons that 2H is the general go-to for stamina PvP. It's really not used as much in PvE. It's more of a PvP weapon, but that's its general main use. Now, resources that can take advantage of 2H weapons, though, of course, stamina, like I just mentioned, for obvious reasons, but magicka can also take use of a two-handed weapon in certain situations. Now, some of you, and now this is the question I've been getting, why? How? The abilities cost stamina. How can a magicka character get use out of a two-handed weapon? Now, magicka can actually get use out of some of the passives from the two-handed skill line, and they could even possibly make use of forward momentum, which is a morph of momentum, for the snare removal and immunity. Again, using a stamina ability for the utility. Now, if you look at the passive, though, heavy weapons, that is the main reason that a magicka character would choose 2H, because if you use a sword, you increase your damage by 5%. So yes, as a magicka unit, if you're using a two-handed weapon, it has to be a sword due to the passives and how they work, and due to how much extra spell damage you get. And that is the main reason why someone would use a two-hander as a magicka character, is for the big increase to their spell damage. But generally, you'll really only use a two-hander as a magicka unit if you're going to use forward momentum. Otherwise, you're going to want to use dual wield if you want to be more melee, dual wield or one-handed shield. And I'm going to go into those two next so that I will explain why. The next weapon we're going to talk about is the One-Handed Shield. Now, again, as you can see from the resources of the abilities, you're going to generally want to use One-Handed Shield if you are using stamina as one of your primary resources, and the main use for a One-Handed Shield is for tanking, obviously, and for PvP. Both magicka and stamina can take use out of One-Handed Shield for PvP. But obviously, the main use for the abilities for One-Handed Shield is someone who favors stamina. But like I said, both resources can take advantage of it. Now, again, the question: why magicka? Why can magicka take use out of One-Handed Shield? Now, slow mobility Magicka users are generally going to be the ones that you see utilizing Sword and Board, just due to the fact that Sword and Board allows them to block a heavy amount of damage, and blocking really acts as a strong source of mitigation, which will allow these slow-moving units to live longer and reach their targets to deal damage. In addition, the shield adds another gear slot, which allows your character to wear another set piece, further unlocking more passive bonuses to augment your character's power. Now, some Magicka users who do use Sword and Shield will find use from Reverberating Bash. Even though it costs stamina and deals a little bit of damage, it offers Major Defile into Stun, which is the main draw to that ability. But if you look at the Sword and Shield abilities, you have reduces the cost of blocking by 18%. Obviously, the increase to weapon damage kind of goes to waste, but increases the damage you can block by 10%. You can bash more. Bash costs less. You can block more from projectiles and ranged attacks. Your movement speed while blocking is increased. So you can make use of a one-handed shield as a slow-moving, tanky Magicka unit. You're just not going to really use any of the abilities unless you want to make use out of reverb. Otherwise, you're using Sword and Board for the passives. That's the main thing, guys. Passives are the key component to a good ESO build, is passives. So if you can take advantage of the passives from the different weapons and armor, class, guilds, etc., that's when you really make a really strong build. For example, my Magicka DK uses Sword and Board because of the passives and my ability to block. It allows me to live longer. It's my main source of mitigation. So that is how Magicka users will gain a use out of a Sword and Board. But now let's move on to dual wield. The next weapon we are going to talk about, or weapons, excuse me, is dual wield. Now, again, dual wield, as you can see by the abilities, clearly the resource for dual wield is stamina. That is what the abilities cost, so that's generally what's going to be using it. The main use for dual wield is stamina PvE. The main reason is that dual wield lacks a reliable gap closer, so that's why generally 2H is used more for PvP. It lacks a reliable gap closer, and rally is just very good. But dual wield will still find its use in certain builds, certain high damage builds that do use generally 2H on its back bar. They will use dual wield for some high damage bleeds or just, like I said, damage in general. But that's more common on stamina builds. But Magicka can also take use out of dual wield. Obviously, like I said, stamina can, but Magicka can as well. Now, again, the question, how can Magicka get use out of dual wield if all the abilities cost stamina? Now, I'm sure you guys are noticing a trend here. It's all about the passives. Magicka can take use out of one really key passive in the dual wield skill line, and that is Twin Blade and Blunt. And that's the main reason why a Magicka character would choose DW. And when Magicka characters do go melee, it's like for DPS, it's one of the reasons that they choose DW. It increases the damage by, I know this tooltip's wrong because I don't have any points in it, 2.5% per sword you're wielding. So it's a total of 5% damage increase. So yes, if you're a Magicka unit, again, you have to dual wield swords just like the 2H sword, and this is going to give you a massive increase to your spell damage, is why you'd want to use dual wield as a Magicka character. It's why I use dual wield on my Magicka Nightblade VMA build. I wanted a really, really large spell damage pool for my execute to make it as strong as possible. But like I said, some of you might be thinking, Dottz, this ends up being the same amount of damage as 2H. What should I choose if I want to be a melee Magicka unit? I kind of touched on this a little bit in the 2H section. But the rule is simple. Are you using forward momentum? If not, I'd say go dual wield. And the reason for that is that another big advantage of dual wield is you get an additional item piece because you're wielding two weapons. And this allows you to have another set piece on your front or back bar wherever you're dual wielding, which further augments your character and increasing your stat pool and your passives. The next weapon that we're going to touch on is the bow. Now, bow, again, if you look at the resources, clearly all cost stamina, so that is who is going to be using a bow. But the main use for bow is stamina PvE and PvP. It's very good in both game modes. You can find use out of the various abilities in the bow skill line for both PvE and PvP. But stamina is really going to be the only resource that uses a bow. No, other like a Magicka character is not going to find any use out of a bow, and it's just because there's no passives or active abilities that a Magicka unit can find any use out of. So therefore, this is really going to be a stamina only weapon. So just keep that in mind when making your character. Now, finally, moving into our magical weapons, the first weapon we're going to talk about is the Destruction Staff. Now, of course, just based on the abilities, the resource for the Destro Staff is Magicka, and Destro will find its main uses in Magicka PvP and PvE. Destro Staffs are fantastic in both environments. It's just such a good weapon type for Magicka, and is generally the most common you'll see a Magicka unit using, especially in PvE. In PvP, it depends. Certain builds like to favor One-Handed Shield or Dual Wield over Destro Staff, but Destro Staff is just really a solid choice for all types of content for a Magicka unit. And Stamina really will not find any use from a Destruction Staff. The main reason is that there's no passive or active abilities in this that stamina can get any use out of, so there's no reason that a stamina character is going to choose a Destro Staff over a melee weapon or a bow. The final weapon that we're going to talk about is the Restoration Staff. Now, the resource for the Restoration Staff is Magicka. The main use you're going to find from a Restoration Staff is for healing, obviously, and then Magicka PvP DPS can also find some good use out of a Restoration Staff due to the fact that the Restoration Staff is going to offer them a lot of healing and utility in a PvP environment, you know, when you're playing solo by yourself or even with a small group. But for PvE, you're not going to ever really use a healing staff on a DPS. You're really just going to only use a healing staff if you're a healer. Now, again, resources that will use a Resto Staff are Magicka. Now, why not Stamina? Again, no passives or active abilities that Stamina is going to get any use out of from the Restoration Staff skill line. Now, I have seen some people use Resto Staffs on Stamina characters, mainly for the Ultimate Lights Champion, but that's a very niche need and really PvP only, and even then, very niche. I've only seen it used like sometimes, and it wouldn't be something that I even recommend to the player base at large or in general. I'm just wanted to bring it up because I've seen it used before, but again, it's not something that I would generally recommend. But that is it for this video, guys. I wanted to go over all of the various weapons, their use, their general use. Now, guys, keep in mind, when I say resource, right? When I say the resource that is a, you know, stamina. If you're putting all your points into stamina, that is your resource. That's what I'm referring to you. All stamina classes, you know, Stamina Nightblade, Stamina Sork, etc., etc. If you're putting all your points into Stamina, that is what I'm calling Stamina. If you're putting all your points into Magicka, you're a Magicka person. That's what I refer to you as Magicka during the video. I also brought up tanking and I brought up healing. So if I didn't say tanking or healing specifically, I was referring to a DPS. I just want to keep that in, you know, I just want to clear that up just so there's no confusion. So just keep in mind that that's what I was talking about. For example, when I said stamina, PvE, and PvP, I'm referring from a DPS perspective. If I was referring to tanking or healing, I said it directly. But that is it for today's video, guys. I've been getting so many questions about this recently that I finally decided to make a video about it. I wasn't going to because I touched on it a bit in my complete beginner guide, but the more questions I got, the more I realized that it wasn't being made clear, and I wanted to make sure that you guys understood why you are able to use certain weapons on certain classes and roles, and what resource you're generally going to want to use for those various weapons. Now, if you guys liked this video, if you found this helpful, if it cleared up the weapons for you, I would appreciate if you left a like on the video. And of course, for more content like this and future streams, and to always be notified with what I'm doing here on YouTube, I'd appreciate it if you hit that sub button as well as the bell next to it to always make sure that you are up to date with what I'm doing here on YouTube. So thanks for stopping by and watching this video, guys. I'm Dottz Gaming, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.